Please help, my Dreamcast has Alzheimer's. Every time I turn it on, it thinks it's November 27th, 1998. This is just due to the fact that my Dreamcast is 20 plus years old and the CMOS battery inside that's keeping track of the date and time is very dead. But what a cool concept, right? I mean, there was a ton of game consoles around this time that started acquiring more non-game features like this. I mean, obviously, even back then, the last place I'm gonna look to check the time is turning on my Dreamcast. What made it special is games could take this brand new variable of real date and time, use it to intertwine gameplay with the Earth's position relative to the sun, blurring the line between your world and this guy's. Games like Animal Crossing wanted to create this illusion that they never stop. These characters live in their own constantly changing world where tomorrow is gonna happen regardless of if the player is there or not. Seasons will change, holidays will pass, and weeds will grow. And rightfully so, your neighbors will probably get pretty upset, especially if it's been 20 years. You can look at games like Animal Crossing as a response to games that showcase a really time-sensitive or serious scenario, where in reality, everything hinges on the player. The world is reactive to the player, rather than the player being reactive to the world. Now, I'm not arguing that one approach is necessarily better than the other, but I think you could argue that the latter is more immersive. For better or for worse, there's an added stress on the decision of choosing when you play. Before we go over some more examples, I wanted to touch on live service games. They're similar in the fact that they're always changing, but different in the fact that they use somebody else's clock. This is what keeps you from setting your device's system date time to like Halloween to experience something early, like an Overwatch Halloween, even though it might not even exist. So let's take a look at some games that utilize their own always moving clock, and as some would say, never sleep. So let's take a look at our first game today, released for the Dreamcast in 1999, a game that I had not played up until making this video. The game Seaman, or Seaman as the narrator, voiced by Leonard Nimoy, lets you know at the start of the game.
You'll witness before you a phenomenon like no other, a man of the sea, Seaman.
My absolute favorite part of this intro is Leonard Nimoy is not playing a character, he's just Leonard Nimoy.
My name is Leonard Nimoy, and I will be your guide.
I hadn't heard of this game until the AVGN did a video on it several years back. That, on top of the game's overall bizarreness, just made me really want to check it out. And, I'm a big Sega Dreamcast fan. As I was getting everything set up to play on my Dreamcast, I was stopped by Leonard Nimoy at the title screen saying that I needed a Dreamcast microphone to play, as speaking to your seaman is an integral part of the game. Unfortunately, I don't have a Dreamcast microphone, and they're real expensive on eBay, so we are going to go the old emulator route today.
You don't know me, but you will. Some say my amphibious nature makes me seem odd. That's because I'm part fish. I must be cold, insensitive, and creepy.
So what exactly is Seaman? Well, it's a pet simulator. Your responsibilities include caring for and raising these creatures called Seaman. Hello. Hey, boys. Hey, boys! As you play and as time on the Dreamcast passes, the seamen themselves will undergo different physical transformations. Starting with Mushroomer, which really does just look like a sperm, and ending with Frogman, where your seamen will sprout legs and become fully independent and self-autonomous. This is done through keeping the tank the seamen live in well lit at the right temperature and ensuring its oxygen level stays up. You'll also need to feed and speak to your seamen.
It's making me scared.
Hello.
Put me down.
Speak to me, as well as let time pass, naturally or unnaturally, as the seamen need more time to grow and Leonard Nimoy needs time to think of new things to say.
This is your 4th visit today. You visit often. If one didn't know better, one might assume you're quite obsessed, or you have nothing better to do.
The game certainly does its best to encourage a habitual playstyle rather than having the player binge for several hours a day. That, or you could look at it as something that's trying to put a twist on the digital aquarium. Something you leave on your TV all day just to look nice and occasionally pop in and talk to your fish people.
What month was your mother born?
You have to remember the Dreamcast was the big graphics boy console going into the new millennia. Some people thought games couldn't get any more realistic than this.
She was born in March? Ha! My knowledge of you and your family grows ever more complete.
Just imagine it's 1998, you have some guests over, they enter the living room to be greeted with the emulated bubbling noise from your Seaman tank and are left speechless by the amount of polygons crammed together to construct a realistic human face framed in your 32-inch CRT. That is an experience only Seaman could provide.
It seems strange to me that with all the wonderful things you can do with your bodies, there are still people out there who are out of shape. It seems like such a shame that your world doesn't naturally allow for more physical activity. But anyway, I know you've been known to dabble in sports, so you must be in pretty good shape. What do you do to keep fit?
Push-ups naked.
Well, that's very interesting.
You'll find as your Seaman grows, the conversation topics and questions it asks get more philosophical and esoteric.
Pretty soon, people won't even need to leave their homes in order to conduct their daily business.
There's definitely a layer of irony in me using the Dreamcast system clock time skip method and how much the Seaman seem to know about the future.
You humans are going to get lazier and less mobile, and forget how to deal with each other face to face. I think things could get pretty ugly a few decades down the road.
Maybe their intuition has something to do with Seaman's extensive backstory that takes place in the 3rd Egyptian dynasty, involving a priest asking the Egyptian god Thoth to turn his daughter into a bird and a man he catches having an affair with her into a fish, thus separating them, and the boy who becomes a fish, that's the Seaman, and thousands of years later, the game starts and involves us raising him so he can evolve back into a man, I think.
At some point, about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, humans finally came up with the greatest tool of all. You know what that was? That's right. The greatest tool of all is language. Without it, you wouldn't be talking to me right now.
The Sonic fans out there may find this interesting. Jeff Kramer, who voiced the Seaman in this game, also voiced E123 Omega in Shadow the Hedgehog. Not that you could really tell.
Eggman detected. Approaching this direction.
It gets lonely in here. I have to talk to someone.
So that's Seaman for the Dreamcast. Definitely a unique experience. Not many games like that. Go ahead and try it out and tell all your friends you're playing Seaman at home. Our next game is going to be one I think people are going to be a bit more familiar with. Well, I'll tell you what, that's Pokémon right there. Yes, starting with Gen 2, or Pokémon Gold and Silver and Crystal, Pokémon started using real date time to influence certain events in the game. But Shanmania, how does the Pokémon game know if it's Monday or Tuesday or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock if the Game Boy doesn't have an internal clock itself? Well, my friend, it's quite simple, really. Instead of the Game Boy itself keeping track of that date-time value, the cartridge does. But because nothing is free, especially in capitalistic America, even though these were made in Japan, keeping track of that value comes with a cost. A lot of strain is put on the Game Boy cartridge battery. Not only is it retaining your save data, it's keeping track of a constantly fluctuating date-time value. This is why it's nearly impossible to find a copy of Pokemon Gold, Silver, or Crystal today with its original battery that isn't dead. It's interesting to note that the developers, Game Freak, dropped these date-time features in the very next generation, Generation 3, and then reintroduced them in Generation 4, which was on the Nintendo DS, a console that kept track of date-time at the system level. So why go through all the trouble for these baby boy Pokemon games? Well, I think the obvious answer is it's done to increase immersion. Although, to go one step deeper, I'd argue it's connected to the same story Pokemon has been telling these last 20 plus years. You have a blank slate avatar that is encouraged to catch 'em all, become the best that ever was, and interact with other trainers aspiring to do the same. These other trainers are your friends in real life. Having an event like the bug catching contest only take place on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays helps create some variety between my Pokemon Pokemon Silver, Journey, and my friends. Take, for example, the Lapras that you can find at the bottom of Union Cave only on Fridays, or the Clefairy dance that takes place every Monday night at the top of Mount Moon. Making your way up there, you'll see a bunch of Clefairies dancing in the moonlight. 1 out of 10 kids might experience an event like this, take it to the playground at school the next day, and the speculation spreads like wildfire. And as a result, the game's world feels more lived in and less lonely. It feels more dynamic and intelligent than your other Game Boy games. Although not every edition using this system was well received. Gen 2 famously introduced the ability to travel back to Generation 1's region of Kanto, which is like the coolest thing they ever did. After the initial voyage from Johto to Kanto, the boat that would transport you between the two was locked to a strict schedule. Only on Wednesdays and Sundays could you go from Kanto to Johto, and Mondays and Fridays, Johto to Kanto. Something like the bug catching contest feels more arbitrary compared to locking out an entire region, and locking out the ability to fly to the other region. It just feels like adding realism for the sake of it, or worse, prolonging the playtime for the sake of it. Either way, that's way too much content to lock out, and have me wait real time to catch a boat. So you might ask, is there a way to manually set the time in Gen 2 Pokemon? Yes, there is, but the way you do it is kind of like entering a cheat code, like the devs weren't super keen on people resetting this without thinking, which is fair, but kind of funny how involved it is compared to just setting your DS clock to whatever you want. For starters, you need to input this button combination on the title screen. If you have Crystal, the button combination is a little bit more complicated. After that, you'll be prompted whether or not you want to reset the clock. Hit yes, and you'll be prompted for a password. The password is a 5-digit numeric string that is derived from your trainer ID, your trainer name, and the amount of money you currently have. Lucky for us, the algorithm that's being used to get these passwords has been decoded and put on a bunch of different websites. I was able to successfully generate my code off of the German Pokemon wiki and successfully use it to reset my clock. Regardless of Gen 2's battery problem, looking back at Gold, Silver, and Crystal, these games really are special for overcoming their own hardware to do something truly unique. Hey, you remember this game, right? Nintendogs for the DS. It sold super well when it released in 2005. It got a sequel, Nintendogs Plus Cats for the 3DS, that sold not so well. The original Nintendogs only saw the light of day for 2 reasons. 1, Nintendo already had a foundation from an unreleased game called Cabbage that was supposed to be on the N64 disk drive system and take advantage of its real-time clock, similar to the Sega Saturn and consoles that would come after it. So you can kind of see where we're going with this. Reason number 2, Shigeru Miyamoto got a dog.
Nintendogs. Care for them, play with them, train them with your voice.
So Nintendogs is a pet simulator, much like Seaman, except your pets are much more normal, being that they're dogs. You adopt them, you pet them, you feed them, you take them on walks, you teach them tricks, enter them in competitions. There's not really an end goal except for having your dogs advance through those competitions. Your dogs can't die, nor will they ever age beyond puppyhood. You can close your DS and open it back up 20 years later and your dogs will still be perfectly healthy. Well, probably a little hungry and thirsty. So as you might have guessed, the real-time mechanics here are pretty basic. They're in place to ensure your dog doesn't learn too many tricks in a day. Some breeds have a higher capacity to learn more than others in a day. Each dog you own also has a cap of how many competitions it can enter in a day, and being that you can own up to 8 dogs, you're gonna be okay in terms of having stuff to do in your play session. If you really want to go hard on one dog, you can, advance the DS clock like we've talked about previously. But, unlike with Seaman, I never felt the need to do that with Nintendogs, back then or today. The time you spend with your dogs and the little tasks that you do, it's just fun enough to elicit like a 20-30 minute play session from me. And there's plenty of carrot on a stick mechanics in the game that make me want to come back, like the shop. Here's where you can buy different accessories and collars for your dogs. You can also redecorate the home that you take care of your dogs in. You can have them live on a beach or live in outer space. It really is the perfect bus ride game. I remember a time in middle school I was playing this on the school bus ride home, and I missed my stop because I was playing Nintendogs. I was too into taking care of my dogs. Really glad I still have this game and I gotta come back to it today. In fact, the only reason I haven't sold it is because it only goes for like $5 on eBay. Next, we're going to talk about some games that use the real-time value, but in a not-so-big way. You might even be familiar with some of these and not even realize they use this value. First is a childhood favorite of mine, Ratchet & Clank 2 Going Commando. This one's pretty obscure, as you'll soon see. Two ex-Insomniac developers, Mike Stout and Tony Garcia, did a dev commentary on this game, where they spoke about pulling the PS2 system date time and displaying it via a giant clock tower in-game. Go ahead and have a listen.
So the minute hand is the circle. The second hand is that little arrow.
Initially, it was supposed to be a 100% real-time clock. Strangely enough, looking up the time on the PlayStation 2 is incredibly expensive.
Really?
Massively expensive. When I first put in the clock thing, it starts off okay, but after about half an hour of polling the time constantly, it becomes horribly unstable. So I put in the clock check. Suddenly, when we were playing the game, like the game would start slowing down over time and eventually become unplayable. And we were like, what the hell is going on?
And it was that, huh?
We debugged it, and it came down to, if you're polling the time constantly on the PlayStation 2, you're going to crush your frame rate. So what ended up happening, it basically sets the time when you load up the level, and then it just sort of advances time as you would normally advance time. It really bothers me to this day that clock can go very far out of sync.
Because you can only poll it a certain number of times.
I can only pull it when you load the level. That's the only time I pull it.
Oh, you pull, and then the rest of it is all just based on how far.
It's just real time ticking every frame.
30 frames or whatever, yeah.
Right, yeah,
60
yeah.
frames.
So there you have it, just a little pinch of real date time in a Ratchet & Clank game. Staying with the PS2, next up we have Metal Gear Solid 3. In this game, Snake can eat animals that he finds in the jungle to replenish stamina, animals like frogs, rats, and snakes. If Snake just leaves the dead animals in his backpack, after about a day or so of real time, they will spoil. Although MGS3 has another use case that I think is more interesting. It's still small, but I feel like this is always like the #1 fun fact about this game. In Metal Gear Solid 3, there's a boss fight against an elderly sniper named The End. And I mean elderly. According to the wiki, he's over 100 years old. The boss fight can be completed normally with, Snake just shooting him, but if the player saves their game and waits at least 8 days and loads it back up, or manually manipulate their PS2 clock to go forward 8 days, they will find The End laying on the ground dead, having died of old age.
Drop your weapon.
This might seem a little campy and out of nowhere if you're unfamiliar with the MGS franchise, but taking a look at Psycho Mantis and Metal Gear Solid 1, this isn't the first time we've seen fourth wall breaking mechanics implemented in a boss fight.
Major, I found The End. He's dead.
What the hell happened?
Maybe it was from old age.
You mean he kicked the bucket in the middle of a battle?
Maybe.
Well, Snake, the victory is yours.
A lot of the games we've been talking about have been measuring the passage of time on a relatively small scale. Hours, days, weeks. But what about games that take advantage of the yearly calendar? Nowadays, developers can just whip up some new holiday season content and send it out via the internet. If you wanted to do this back in the physical media days, it had to come pre-baked in. Now, there are more of these than you would think, and I'm very liable to miss some, so I'm gonna skim over some examples. My first exposure to this was the GTA-esque Simpsons games. Simpsons Road Rage had unlockable holiday versions of some characters for Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day. Hit and Run downgraded a bit with holiday-themed start menus for the previously mentioned holidays minus New Year's. Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights did a similar batch of holidays. Notably on St. Patrick's Day, we can see a green fountain at the starting area and chimneys emitting green smoke. If you unfortunately find yourself playing this on Valentine's Day, you will see hearts emit from collected Scooby snacks. Moving on, we can't not talk about Christmas Nights for the Sega Saturn, possibly the first ever console game to implement a real-time clock value, releasing in November of 1996. For those unfamiliar, this isn't actually a fully fledged game per se, it's referred to as a demo or a sampler that was released 4 months after the original Nights into Dreams. It was one Christmas-themed level and boss, but it would change if you played it on certain winter holidays. For example, Christmas and Christmas Eve, you'll see a Santa Claus cameo. During the first half of January, the title screen says Happy New Year's, the music would change, and the children characters you control will have special New Year's outfits. There's a similar event for Valentine's Day and a primarily Japanese holiday I wasn't aware of, White Day, which takes place on March 14th, 1 month after Valentine's Day, where those who received gifts will send a response gift. Candy falling from the sky will be visible on this day. April Fools will have the player control the rival character, Riala. Finally, if you boot the game up outside of the winter season, the game becomes Nights Limited Edition, where the visuals will revert to the assets used in the original release of Nights into Dreams. One more thing to note is that the subsequently released HD versions added additional costumes for autumn and summer months. They also included Christmas nights as an unlockable mode for completing the game, so it's not just lost forever on the Sega Saturn. Being that it's the holiday season at the time of making this video, I wanted to end on one of the coziest implementations of this. It's a game you probably don't expect, I know I didn't expect it, that being Gran Turismo. Specifically Gran Turismo 5 and onward. Every year, around Christmas time, the title menu will be accompanied by some soothing, holiday-inspired jazz music. Personally, I'm absolute garbage at the GTs that I own, 3 and 4, but I've considered picking up one of these just for the holiday ambiance it might provide. Whether or not you get value out of this kind of functionality, you have to admit it definitely was a unique time in gaming. A time before consoles were tied indefinitely to the internet, but after it was possible to confuse them with a toaster. It was certainly the uncanny valley of console functionality. Manufacturers beginning to answer the question, what else besides games? Or what else can games be? They can be therapeutic. They can provide unique experiences between players. They can have longevity. Animal Crossing isn't a game you beat in a day, and that ties right into value. Parents love getting a game that will distract their kids for more than 2 hours.
I'm sorry to inform you that Seaman has passed away.
Oh. One more thing I learned taking a look at this collection is good things come to those who wait. Was it really enjoyable to fast forward the clock? Maybe once or twice, but I might as well play another game if I'm gonna spend 20% of playtime rebooting and screwing with the system clock. Obviously, there are exceptions, but sometimes it's better to just get that genuine experience and let things progress naturally.
Take care, and if you ever want to talk to me, just call me, okay? You've been a good friend. I'll miss our time together.
Hey everybody, this is Shanmania. Thank you very much for watching the video. I apologize for the quality of this outro. I'm using an old webcam. All my nice stuff is packed away because I'm in the middle of a move right now. I also wanted to use this moment to say thank you for all the support this channel has gotten throughout 2023. All of your likes, comments, subscribes, pressing all the buttons has been awesome, and I truly thank you guys for all the support, because I love doing this, and I love getting feedback, positive or negative. It's great. So with that, everybody, please have a wonderful and safe 2024. I will see you then. Don't forget to tip your servers, and take care.